Well, good morning to everybody. It is good to see you. Before we begin our study, Michael, would you care to lead us in a prayer? Amen. Very good. Appreciate that. So this week is another religion that a lot of us don't have a lot of connection with. I think we have it. Well, you've probably encountered it more than you've realized, and it's something that's there quite a bit. We're on page 43, I think it is. Talking about Hinduism, and Hinduism is very closely related to where we were last week with Buddhism, because Buddhism was just like an offshoot of Hinduism. Siddhartha Gautama grew up, his family was Hindu, and we'll see exactly where he fell in later, but it was kind of an offshoot and just a response to some of this. There are a lot of Eastern religions that get their start from Hinduism. If you've ever heard of Jainism or Sikhism, those are separate things. Those came from Hinduism. Hinduism is kind of like a broad umbrella term of several different faiths. And really the essence of Hinduism, what we're going to see and what we're going to get into, is that there are many ways to the divine. And it's not like what Hindus normally would say is that we are all on the same journey, but we're taking different paths to get there. We all have the same goal. And I think we're going to find that a lot of what we would consider the New Age movement and a lot of things that we see here, like the coexist type stuff, the religious tolerance, those ideas have their foundations in Hinduism. And there's actually a lot of connections there. So we're going to talk about that a lot. Hinduism is the third largest religion. I think I read that somewhere. I don't know if it's in the book or not. But I think it is the third largest. Okay, there you go. Yeah, about 900 million. There, appreciate that. So it is the third largest. It's below Islam, but above Buddhism. Ranks third. Now, as it says here, of the 900 million Hindus in the world, there's about 1 million in the U.S., and most of the rest are in India, because that's where it came from. And it's kind of interesting how Hinduism came to be. Hinduism wasn't something that the Hindu people decided to call themselves. It was actually this evolution of terms throughout the years of what other people called them. So that was just kind of fascinating. You have essentially the country of India. You just go to where India is and look at India. That area, the belief system, the faith of people in that area, it's very diverse, and there's all kinds of different ways of belief and ways of thinking, but it's kind of like everyone there is considered to be Hindu. And Hinduism is something that, I'm sort of all over the place. As always, are you surprised? But Hinduism is one of those things where it's not something that a lot of Hindi teachers would tell you. Hindi's a language, not Hindu is different. Terminology is kind of hard as well. But it's not something that they would consider the need to convert to or something like that. It's more of, since we're all on our own path, you follow what is your truth and what is right for you. And if some of these practices, thinking about their sacred texts, their idea of gods, then go for that, because that's great too. Okay. We'll get into some of that a little bit later as well. But here it is. Here's how we got to the term Hindu or Hinduism. So back in the Persian time, no. Take another step back. Sorry. Meredith is staring me down. Like too much. Pull it back. Hinduism is considered to be the world's oldest religion, oldest organized religion, and it's traced back to a long time ago in this area. But it depends on what you mean by organized religion, and depends on what you mean in like when did it start? When does a religion start? Is it when people start practicing things? When you start writing down things? When you finish writing down things? And it's kind of hard to pin down. We'll see this. The word Hindu actually came from a mispronunciation of a term because in this area there was the Sind River, Sindh, and in the time of the ancient Persians, so like 500-ish BC, when Persia was the world power, they couldn't pronounce Sind, and so they called it the Hind River. And so people in that area were Hindus. And then you had the Greeks that took over later, and they had problems with that pronunciation, and that's where we get the term India. So India it was a Greek thing. Why am I losing my voice again? There we go. So, I dropped things. Anyways, you had India, and that was the area. So India, there we go. The term Hindu really came, it was a Muslim distinction when Muslims were trying to separate themselves from everyone else who was in the area. And so they were like, okay, anybody who is not Muslim or any of these other major religions, we're going to classify as, we call it the Hindi region, so you are going to be Hindu. Later on, when the British were so this was like way later, it was like 1700s, I think, before we actually got the term Hinduism. And Hinduism was just whatever other religions were there in the area. And it could be so many different practices, but we're just going to pile you all together and say, you all believe the same stuff. You all believe the same thing. And this is how our human minds work, right? We like to classify things. We like to have things nice, neat, in order, and if it doesn't fit within our perspective of what it is, then it's just something else. It's weird. And so we use the word weird a lot for stuff like that. But our perspective, I think, would be weird to a lot of people from the East. And so this is why it's so hard, especially in a 1 to 2 class period session, to discuss a religion that's so vast and has such a different starting point from where we are. There are a lot of similarities, and this will help that we can build on some of the stuff we talked about in Buddhism, because it helps lead us to think about Hinduism as well. What are the major concepts? Remember we talked about last time the difference between the main problem that humans have from a Westerner's perspective versus from the Eastern world. What was that? What in our mind, Western Christianity, what would we consider to be the major problem of life? Yeah. So sin, we have separation from God. So we have this concept that God is a being that is not us, that is separate being. And so if you can imagine circles, like the old school Venn diagrams, and not really old school, we still use those. But you have a circle here. Well, if you have a circle here, and then you have one that doesn't overlap, that means they're not really connected. And that's what we see with Western thought and with Christianity and with Judaism, with Islam, with several other religious split. But you have God here, and then you have me. You have us individually. And we are trying to get back to God. We are trying to reconnect with God. And depending on your system of faith, if you have that mindset, Judaism, it's a connection to God through a covenant. Islam is a connection to God through what was revealed, Prophet Muhammad and some of the, reading the Quran and the, Sharia law and all that. So, how do we get back? Christianity, obviously, we connect that with Jesus because he, with the cross, connected us directly, so we have that relationship with God again. Okay, we got that. We know that. Eastern thought and Eastern religion is more like, one more step back. we talked about with Buddhism, like the concept of God, it doesn't really matter. Buddhism can be something where you're either atheistic or even agnostic. It doesn't matter if there's a God or not. It's just we all live in this eternal realm of continuous existence. And so that was the idea there, which came from a practice in Hinduism where there is God. There is a God. There actually is one overall God in Hinduism called Brahman. And God is this big circle. Now, instead of having separate circles outside of that we are trying to get back there, all of us are actually small circles inside the big circle. So it's like we have the big circle of Brahman, and we are individually part of that. So essentially, we are God. We are part of God, of this overall thing. And so is every living thing. So is every single thing that is in existence. We are all part of Brahman. And actually, we're all kind of like I wouldn't say dream, but we aren't like really real. We're kind of like thoughts that have just emanated from this great power called Brahman. And so that's what we're getting to. A lot of people would consider Hinduism to be polytheistic, and that's kind of right. But most Hindus would not consider them to be polytheistic. What they say, because Brahman is this one overall God, one power, one overall thing. Yes, it's true. They do have 330 million gods in their system of worship. We're not going to get to all of them today or ever. But there are a lot of different gods that are under this umbrella term. But their concept is not necessarily like not polytheism. It's not really monotheism either, because monotheism is like we are trying to get to God, a separate being. It's like a monistic pluralism or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad that I'm not alone in that. So I'm glad that got confirmation. There we go. And I think that is something that can really hinder us if we aren't careful with our terminology. If we're speaking to someone who is from this faith, because if you go and say, oh, you worship all these other gods, and you're polytheistic, it's like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. And you're immediately going to put up roadblocks. So I think we need to be careful with how we categorize and how we initiate conversations, because, that'll get us nowhere pretty fast. Okay, so it's hard to wrap your mind around it. I've been struggling with this for a while, but we have Brahman, the overall power, the essence, and everything. He is God, the eternal one. But then you have all of these personalities, all of the characteristics. If Brahman, it sometimes reveals himself as a fire god, or a fertility god, or a creator god. We actually, in Hindu, there are three major gods that a lot of Hindus, and depending on which type of Hinduism you will prescribe to, you might serve one of those more so than the others. There's Brahma, which is the same as Brahman without the N, but completely different. He is the creator, the one that created the universe, put all the stuff together. There is, Vishnu. There we go. Vishnu is the sustainer, the one who holds everything together, who causes things to remain as they are, keeps things in balance, keeps things in order, is responsible for gravity, keeping planets aligned, and all of these other powers. A lot of people view Vishnu as the most important one that we should revere, and so there's a lot of people who are focused on serving Vishnu. And then there is Shiva, or Shiva, or Siva. And he is the destroyer. The way they view that isn't that Shiva is mean, cruel, unjust. It's just that we have what was created and was sustained eventually runs out, and you need to destroy it so you can start again. The concept of the universe isn't that we were created, we live, we die, that's the end. That is not the concept in Hinduism. It is we are created, we exist, we die, we're created again, we exist, we die, we're created again. Not just individually, but also as a whole, the universe. It goes through these cycles. And there's no way to tell from what they say, how many times this has happened. But it's just like this eternal time loop that we're constantly in. And I think they said that there's like a 4 billion year rotation where you have creation, things are being sustained, and then eventually it'll all be destroyed so it can be created again and refreshed and all that. So there's that thought, those things. Yeah. Right. It is interesting, as far as you've heard of a lot of these because they're very popular, and especially the ones that are more closely revered or looked up to or talked about or worshipped. We have a lot of that in popular culture. You have things like, you've probably heard of Krishna, Hare Krishna, that sort of thing, and that was from a Beatles song. The Beatles were Hindu. Actually, they converted. There's several. I guess this is a good point to say this. Will you encounter some Hinduism in your life, in your normal everyday activities? Probably, actually. And there's a growing number of celebrities, and I know celebrities, they don't matter, and they don't their life doesn't impact us normally. But there are a lot of people who are really looking up to some of these celebrities, and when they see, oh, this is what they're teaching and thinking and feeling and doing, maybe I should follow that. We just need to be aware of that so we can look out for that. Common people you might know, Russell Brand, if you've seen some of his talking. He's kind of more of a New Age version of that, but it's definitely steeped in Hinduism. You have people like Hugh Jackman, Sylvester Stallone, I think Will Smith even. You have a few others. But Miley Cyrus. There are several, and I think that just the overall mindset of you can be who you want to be, no matter who you are, there you are, and you can use your own path to get to the ultimate goal. So that is that. Yeah.
Do you know any of these gods are in the form of an animal?
I don't know. Aaron might.
There's one called Ganesh. It's a human body, but an elephant head.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That comes close to that, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are in human form. Shiva, the destroyer, has multiple arms. He's a man with multiple arms.
Right.
He was quoted by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer gave a pretty famous speech about when they tested the atomic bomb. And he said he considered himself, I am Shiva, destroyer of worlds, quoting from the Bhagavad Gita.
But,
And
right.
said more about that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I think that most of them are anthropomorphized in some way to have human characteristics, or because that's what we connect to. I think I remember hearing someone teaching on that it is very much so we focus in human terms, so seeing gods that relate to us, that's kind of where they are with that. As far as symbols go, we talked about the swastika last week, and how that is used in a lot of Eastern religions, and it was used way before the 1940s, so 1930s. So yeah, this one, the right-facing swastika, is used in Hinduism a lot, and it represents prosperity and good fortune. But the most important symbol in all of Hinduism is the symbol at the bottom of page 43. It's called the Om. And you're probably very familiar with that word, Om. And it's this sacred word that is like they consider to have really no meaning that we can say in words, but it's just this resonation of the eternal, of this spiritual thing, and it represents totality of the universe. Remember in Buddhism, what was the ultimate goal? What was the ultimate goal of a Buddhist? Yeah, to reach nirvana, or enlightenment, or Buddhahood, or whatever you want to call that. There is a similar thing in Hinduism called moksha, and that is where there's our ultimate goal, becoming one with the universe, because we realize that the universe really is one with us, that we are God, essentially. That's the concept there. So that is a decent little introduction. The history, if that's interesting to you, we can talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Before you go on to that, the term for believing in an overarching God and the existence of lower beings is henotheism.
Okay. Henotheism. Okay. There's a lot of those descriptive words that are very. I mean, I don't know what all of them are, and so it's definitely hard. Yeah. Oh, right. That that is really interesting. I'm glad you had those conversations, because I think you get more when you talk to someone who actually lives that and has those beliefs, especially if you're open to discussing them instead of coming out right at the gate and just being like, yeah, you're wrong. Like, it is really good to have those open talks. There are several, as we have seen, there are several gods, deities, that they ascribe to as having the power that, interacting with us throughout time. And through a lot of these writings, probably the most sacred writing that the Hindus would look back to are the Vedas. And the Vedas, there are 4 of them, actually, and depending on your particular leanings, you might look at one more so than the others. There's one, I don't think I wrote this down. There's one of these, can't remember which one it is, but there is one of these that deals more with, it's kind of like blessings and curses, as far as like kind of a mystical spellcasting type idea. And they really warn against, unless you are, you have close connection with a guru who will teach you how to use that, you shouldn't even read it, because you could end up doing a lot of bad stuff. And they ascribe a lot of, like, women have miscarriages because they have read part of this and they have brought a curse on themselves or something like that. And, those sorts of ideas. But there are 4 major Vedic sets of texts, And you can see the names there, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva. They've been passed on throughout the centuries, and there's different things that are in those Vedas, just basic core beliefs that a lot of Hindus believe. Again, if you are Hindu, you might not believe any of that. You might, because you have your own path. Remember, like that's the thing. We cannot generalize and just say that all Hindus believe this, because it's not really how it works. It's very more open. And when we get to talking about how to have conversations with Hindus, it's going to be a lot of what we said with Buddhism, actually. You need to ask questions. You need to hear where they are and their understanding of this, so it helps. All right, now on page 44, there's some just overall ideas, thoughts about some of the gods that they worship. And at different times, they revered different gods in higher orders. Indra, Varuna, and Agni, those were specific gods that they were following. But ultimately, number 4, we have Brahman, that the overall God, the one who is over all of those. And number 5 does say what Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva became preeminent in Indian pantheon, and those are the ones who, I think over time what happened is we had all these lower deities that we ascribed several of the characteristics to one. And so they were like, let's focus on this one because it kind of encompasses a lot of these thoughts and ideas. So that's what some things you might find in the Vedic texts, and there's a lot of them, and it's long. There's a lot of writings. If you look at all of these writings put together, you will not have time to read those if you try to set out to do that. I can't remember which one it is. I think it was the epic Mahabharata, which was I think 5 times as long as the Bible, and that was just one of them. And putting all those together, that's a lot. So if the Vedic text, they were considered to, what's the word? There was a word. The Vedic texts were considered to be Shruti, or divinely revealed teachings directly from Brahman. And that was like direct revelation. Now, the others are considered to be inspired by Brahman. And so that's kind of how those relate. You have the Upanishads, which are essentially commentaries on the Vedas. So it's like how explaining some of the teachings of the Vedas. You have the 2 great epics, the Ramayana, which Rama was an incarnation. Actually, they use the word avatar. So the word, like our word avatar, comes from this. It's an avatar is just like a god who comes down to earth in human form. And so it's this person is God, essentially, but in human form. And depending on who you ask, there are several different avatars throughout history. Some would even consider Jesus to be an avatar, and Moses, and even Muhammad, and some of these other teachers. But Rama was also one of those, and the Ramayana is basically the stories of Rama. And yeah, the Mahabharata was, I think, this big poem. The Bhagavad Gita was a part of the Mahabharata, just a very specific part. It's actually an excerpt that talks about Arjuna, who was this warrior, and his interactions with Krishna, who Krishna is like one of the most important avatars in all of Hinduism. A lot of people look at Krishna as being something very special, and a human incarnation of Vishnu, of that god. So, there you go. The Puranas, not like piranha fish, but Purana, and those have different things. Kind of written from a mythological standpoint, tells stories about these things. and the Tantras. Those just demonstrate some types of practices and actually criticize Orthodox Hindu practices as inferior and elementary. So there's that. As far as major beliefs go, again, it depends. You could be considered a good Hindu and not believe any of this. There is, I don't know if they would call it secular Hinduism, but a pursuit of this, the goal of moksha, there we go. The goal of moksha without going a spiritual route. And there are ways to do that. And if it's like, whatever you are, be the best that you can be. And so there we go. As far as their concept of gods, we've been over that. I think we see what that is. They do highly revere cows. Cow is a divine animal because, as it says here, all they do is just eat grass and grain, and they provide milk and leather and all of this great type of thing. We're going to get into the caste system here in a bit, probably Wednesday actually, but caste system is really a dividing line between Hindu society and you were born in a specific caste. And there's some debate about this, but it seems like most of the upper castes, the 3 upper castes, they will stay away. They won't eat cows at all. They worship them, they highly revere them. But the lowest caste, which is like peasants, and what they use the word peasants, but like the workers, the laborers, those are the ones, they actually do eat cow. Even though they worship it, and they're very thankful for it, but they eat it. And that puts a little bit more distinction and kind of hard feelings of the upper caste to the lower, because they really look down on that. I have some stuff I'm going to read, I guess next time, about Isaac Nagur, the preacher we support in India. I asked him some questions about his experience dealing, because he lives in India and he is around people all the time, and he mentions that in his daily evangelistic efforts, reaching out to people around him, some of the highest opposition comes from the higher castes of Hinduism. And he said that the lower caste, you can actually have a lot of good conversations with, and he's had a lot of studies with them and talked to them. But the upper castes, that's a tougher one to go to, because it's kind of like what we were talking about with Islam, that if you leave your faith, Islamic faith, the family just completely disowns you. You're an outcast in society. And actually that term outcast comes from the caste system of Hinduism, because if you are not like within the caste system, there is a lower status than the lowest. And it's the no caste, but they are called outcast. And those are the people who deal with scrubbing toilets and just some of the lowest of the low jobs, the ones that have to touch dead bodies and anything that they would. Cleanliness is something that is considered, the cleanliness is next to God. Yeah, there we go. And that's kind of a Hindu concept as well. And so if you have to touch the unclean stuff, you were considered casteless, or you were an outcast. Now, how do you move different castes? Well, we haven't even talked about what the castes are. We'll get to that. But all of this is driven by karma and reincarnation and rebirth. And so we'll look at that too. Okay, as far as offices go, I'll say this too. Hinduism, there is not a single person we could look at as the founder of the religion. Like Judaism, a lot of people look at Moses as, he gave the law of Moses, and so we are followers of Moses. That's fine. Obviously, Christianity, we look at Jesus. And Islam, we look at Muhammad. And Catholicism, we look at the Pope. And there's all kinds of these things. But when it comes to Hinduism, there wasn't one person. It was like developed over time, and that's why I think there's so many different branches and different flavors of this as well. But you do have some offices. You can have Hindu priests that are over the religious rituals. Maybe have a shrine or a temple, but also perform marriage rites, death rites. There's things like that. A guru is a teacher. I think we understand the concept of guru. Usually a mentor, and then just working one-on-one with a person. A yogi, who is very dedicated to the practice of yoga. Yoga is a very Hindu practice. And actually, we're going to see that the different paths you may take as a Hindu are called yogas. Not all yoga is what we consider to be yoga. Like, I think when we consider yoga, it's like contorting your body in weird positions. And that is one form of yoga. But there are four major ones. I think the type of yoga that we are familiar with, well, okay, spoiler alert, on page 46, the philosophy of yoga, union with God, there are four main types. There's bhakti yoga, and that's a way of devotion. You're able to get close to God because of being devoted, by saying these mantras, and by connecting yourself that way. There's the karma yoga, where you can get close to God through acts of service. It's through doing things. It's ritualistic, performing these ceremonies and carrying out good works. There's the jnana yoga, the way of knowledge, and that's for intellectuals. The more you study, the more you ask questions, you are like teaching things. That's the way that you can get there. And then there's the raja yoga, which is the way of contemplation. That is your meditation. That is your physical, body position type things. And all of that in union. But the one that we are familiar with is probably an offshoot of Raja Yoga. It's called Hatha Yoga, also known as secular yoga, or yoga without a spiritual connotation. And so there's a question that comes up sometimes. Is it okay for Christians to do yoga? And my answer is it depends. Probably yes. But if this is one of those 1 Corinthians 10 situations, I think. Because if you go somewhere and there's yoga going on, and someone says, "Oh, let's join in our worship to Brahman through this practice," maybe don't do that, because it's one of those things where, like in 1 Corinthians 10, the last part of that, the question came up: what happens if I go to someone's house who says, "Hey, here's some meat that was sacrificed to an idol. Join in our feast to this idol"? What do you do with that? And Paul's like, don't, just avoid that. And so anyways, it's one of those, if someone's like saying, we're going to worship through our body movements, maybe not do that. But if it's yoga, stretching, that's good exercise. Like it is. It can be, pretty good for you. Just take out the religious connotations there. You'll be good. Speaking of that, do you know what the term namaste means? Yeah. Exactly. Yep, there it is. And so it came from this Hindu idea of, since we are all God, part of Brahman, then I recognize the light, the deity, the godhood in you, the divinity in you. And so it's like, I bow to your divinity, the light that's in you. And so it's like this connection. And so, yeah, that's where it came from. It's really interesting. Other religious titles. Almost lost my train of thought again. Swami, probably heard that. That's another form of teacher, and it's renouncers. So they have given up certain things in life. We talked about with Buddhism, remember, that there is a form of Buddhism where you have like Buddhist monks that will separate themselves from life completely, cut off all connections with things around them, cut off all desire, so that way they can connect with their spiritual side or with their being one with the universe. Swami's kind of like that. And you definitely have a form of Hinduism that does separate yourself from everything as well. So, yeah. A sadhu, I don't know pronunciation of that. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I apologize if, don't use my pronunciations to try and tell people this is how you do it, because it's not. But this person is any kind of Hindu holy man, and could be from like some kind of monastery, could be an itinerant ascetic. Do you know what asceticism is? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, just you are putting yourself through, it's like a self-discipline type thing, removing all forms of pleasure, really. So, yeah, you got that. Okay, so the rest of this, I think we'll aim to look at Wednesday. Something I'll mention here, though. Some of the major differences that we see between Hinduism, with Buddhism, and with some of the other, like we're not, in this quarter, we're not going to get to Jainism or Sikhism. Those are very similar to Hinduism, and the distinctions are, like Jainism is very extremely peaceful. Like they wear things over their mouth so they don't accidentally breathe in a bug to like kill it. Sometimes they even like sweep in front of them so they don't step on like a bug. So they'll like sweep the area as they're walking, so that way they don't accidentally step and kill something, because all life is sacred and that sort of thing. Sikhism, that is, should have wrote this down. One of them is, is Brahman, is like, this is the God we are serving, and this is the overall God. But the other is like, no, not really. It's just the universe is the universe, and everything is part of the universe. And a lot of the statements like, the universe is happy with me, and that sort of thing comes from those. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Right. That makes sense. Yeah, and very much so. I appreciate that. Look, any other questions, comments, let me know, and we'll look into that. But we'll pick up, Lord willing, Wednesday. Thank you all.